Hello students, welcome to Quest for Learning. Today I will discuss the chapter Memories of Childhood by Jit Class and Mama from class 12 English Vistas. The chapter contains two extracts from two different autobiographical episodes from the lives of two women from marginalized communities who look back upon their childhood experiences and give an insight on their relationship with the mainstream culture. They are from different parts of the world and were born in different times but experience oppression in same forms. Both stories highlight the women's oppression, class barriers, racialism, discrimination, and exploitation that tend to pull them down. The first account is by an American Indian woman, and the second is by a contemporary Tamil Dalit writer. Jitkalasa was the pen name of Native American writer Gertrude Simmons, born in 1876. She published articles criticizing the Carlisle Indian School, which was run by the white Americans. Let us read the first part, The Cutting of My Long Hair. The first day in the land of apples was a bitter cold one, for the snow still covered the ground and the trees were bare. A large bell rang for breakfast, its loud metallic voice crashing through the belfry overhead and into our sensitive ears. The annoying clatter of shoes on bare floors gave us no peace. The constant clash of harsh noises with an undercurrent of many voices murmuring an unknown tongue made a bedlam within which I was securely tied, and though my spirit tore itself in struggling for its lost freedom, all was useless. The writer describes her first day at Carlisle Indian School in the land of apple. राइटर जिटक्लसा अपना स्कूल के पहले दिन का अनुभव का वर्णन करती है. It was very cold and unpleasant as there was a lot of snow around. दिन काफी ठंडक वाला और खराब रहा. बर्फ ने धरती को ढका हुआ था और वृक्षों की पत्ती झड़ चुकी थी. A large bell rang for breakfast. नाश्ते की घोषणा के लिए एक बड़ी घंटी बजाई गई. There was an annoying clatter of feet on the entire bare floor. नंगी फर्श पर जूतों की कर्कश टक टक होने लगी. Jitklasa felt herself tied in a bedlam of noises. जिटक्लसा ने महसूस किया कि वह शोरगुल से भरे पागलखाने में बांध दी गई हो. Her spirit struggled hard for its lost freedom, but all was useless. उसकी आत्मा अपनी खोई हुई स्वतंत्रता के लिए संघर्ष करने लगी, परंतु अब सब बेकार था. A pale-faced woman with white hair came up after us. We were placed in a line of girls who were marching into the dining room. These were Indian girls in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. The small girls wore sleeved aprons and singled hair. As I walked noiselessly in my soft moccasins, I felt like sinking to the floor, for my blanket had been stripped from my shoulders. I looked hard at the Indian girls, who seemed not to care that they were even more immodestly dressed than I in their tight-fitting clothes. While we marched in, the boys entered at an opposite door. I watched for the three young braves who came in our party. I spied them in the rear ranks, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. A small bell was tapped, and each of the pupils drew a chair from under the table. A pale-faced woman with white hair came up and placed all the girls in a line. एक सफेद बालों वाली गोरी औरत आई और सभी लड़कियों को एक पंक्ति में खड़ा कर दिया. The girls started marching into the dining room. लड़कियों ने भोजन कक्ष के अंदर जाना शुरू किया. There were Indian girls in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. आदिवासी लड़कियों ने स्टिफ शूज और टाइट ड्रेस डाली हुई थी. Small girls wore sleeved apron. छोटी लड़कियां बाजुओं वाले एप्रन पहने हुई थी. And singled hair. उनके बाल काटे हुए थे. As the writer walked noiselessly in her soft flat shoes, She felt like sinking to the floor. जब राइटर अपने मुलायम जूते पहनकर बिना कोई आवाज किए चल रही थी, उसे ऐसे लगा जैसे कि वह फर्श के बीच में धंसी जा रही है. For her blanket had been stripped from her shoulders. और जो कंबल था कंधों पर से फिसला जा रहा था. The Indian girls didn't seem to care, though they were more immodestly dressed in tight-fitting clothes. हालांकि आदिवासी लड़कियों ने टाइट ड्रेसेस डाली हुई थी, पर उन्हें इसकी बिल्कुल भी परवाह नहीं थी. बिल्कुल वो शर्म फील नहीं कर रही थी. The boys entered at an opposite door. दूसरे दरवाजे से लड़के अंदर आए. Writer watched for 3 young braves. राइटर की नज़र 3 लड़कों पे पड़ी जो बहुत बहादुर थे. Who were also uncomfortable as she felt. वह भी राइटर की तरह ही असुविधा और असहज महसूस कर रहे थे. Small bell was tapped. एक छोटी घंटी बजाई गई. Each of the pupils drew a chair from under the table. प्रत्येक छात्र ने टेबल के नीचे से एक कुर्सी खींची. Supposing this act meant they were to be seated, I pulled out mine and at once slipped into it from one side. But when I turned my head, I saw that I was the only one seated, and all the rest at our table remained standing. Just as I began to rise, looking shyly around to see how chairs were to be used, a second bell was sounded. All were seated at last, and I had to crawl back into my chair again. I heard a man's voice at one end of the hall, and I looked around to see him, but all the others hung their heads over their plates. As I glanced at the long chain of tables, I caught the eyes of a pale-faced woman upon me. Immediately I dropped my eyes, wondering why I was so keenly watched by the strange woman. The man ceased his mutterings, and then a third bell was tapped. The writer, Jitkilasa, doesn't understand the rules at the breakfast table. राइटर ब्रेकफास्ट टेबल के नियम के बारे में नहीं जानती है. She thought the first bell meant they were to be seated. वह सोचती है पहली घंटी का मतलब बैठना है. राइटर pulled her chair and at once gets seated. राइटर कुर्सी निकालती है, एकदम बैठ जाती है. But she found herself being noticed by all others as none of them had seated. पर उन्होंने देखा कि उनके सिवाय सभी अन्य विद्यार्थी अभी खड़े हुए थे. The next bell rang and all others seated themselves. दूसरी घंटी लगने पर सभी बैठ गए. The writer also did it once again just to mend her mistake. राइटर हिचकिचाते हुए अपनी कुर्सी पर बैठ गई. Suddenly she heard a manly voice from one corner of the room. अचानक उन्होंने हॉल के एक कॉर्नर से आदमी की आवाज सुनी. She tries to see the man. उन्होंने आदमी को देखने की कोशिश की, but found everyone looking down towards their plates. परंतु सभी अन्य विद्यार्थियों को अपनी प्लेट्स पर सिर झुकाए पाया. While she was looking at them, जब वह उन्हें देख रही थी, she saw that the yellow-faced woman was constantly looking at her. एक गोरी औरत लगातार राइटर को घूर रही थी. She dropped her eyes. राइटर ने अपनी नजर नीचे झुका ली, but was feeling uncomfortable about being watched like this. परंतु परेशान थी कि वह औरत उसे ऐसी क्यों देख रही थी. The man stopped speaking. आदमी ने बुदबुदाना बंद कर दिया. Then a third bell was tapped. फिर तीसरी घंटी बजाई गई. Everyone picked up his knife and fork and began eating. I began crying instead, for by this time I was afraid to venture anything more. But this eating by formula was not the hardest trial in that first day. Late in the morning, my friend Judwin gave me a terrible warning. Judwin knew a few words of English, and she had overheard a pale-faced woman talk about cutting our long, heavy hair. Our mothers had taught us that only unskilled warriors who were captured had their hair shingled by the enemy. Among our people, short hair was worn by mourners and shingled hair by cowards. With the ringing of third bell, everyone picked up knife and fork and started eating. तीसरी घंटी लगने पर प्रत्येक ने अपने चाकू और फोर्क उठाया, खाना शुरू कर दिया. Writer got so afraid by the time that she started crying as she didn't want to get into such a risky task any more. राइटर इतनी डर गई थी कि उन्होंने रोना शुरू कर दिया. वे कोई जोखिम नहीं लेना चाहती थी. Eating by formula was not difficult trial in that first day. फार्मूले के द्वारा खाना उस दिन मुश्किल कोशिश नहीं थी. She was upset because her friend Judwin told her that she had overheard a white woman talk about cutting her long heavy hair. वह परेशान इसलिए थी क्योंकि जूडविन ने बताया कि वाइट वुमेन उनके बाल काटने के बारे में बात कर रही थी. In her culture, captured unskilled warriors had shingled hair. राइटर बताते हैं कि उनकी संस्कृति में केवल अनिपुण योद्धा जो पकड़े जाते हैं उनके बाल छोटे कर दिए जाते हैं दुश्मन के द्वारा, या फिर जो शोकग्रस्त पीपल होते हैं जिनके घर में डेथ हुई होती है उनके बाल काटे जाते हैं, या फिर डरपोक लोगों के बाल छोटे कर दिए जाते हैं. पर राइटर के साथ ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं था. We discussed our fate some moments, and when Judwin said we have to submit because they are strong, I rebelled. No, I will not submit. I will struggle first, I answered. I watched my chance, and when no one noticed, I disappeared. I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could in my squeaking shoes. My moccasins had been exchanged for shoes. Along the hall, I passed without knowing whither I was going. Turning aside to an open door, I found a large room with 3 white beds in it. The windows were covered with dark green curtains which made the room very dim. Thankful that no one was there, the writer and her friend Judwin discussed about their destiny for some time. Judwin said that they had to submit because the school authorities were strong. Judwin ने कहा कि उन्हें समर्पण करना होगा क्योंकि स्कूल अथॉरिटीज शक्तिशाली हैं. द राइटर रिवेल्ड. द राइटर अपोज्ड. शी डिसाइडेड टू स्ट्रगल बिफोर सबमिटिंग. राइटर ने संघर्ष करने का फैसला कर लिया. वह ऐसी सरेंडर नहीं करना चाहती थी. शी लुक्ड फॉर हर चांस एंड डिसअपियर्ड अननोटिस. मौका ढूंढकर राइटर बिना दिखाई दिए गायब हो गई. शी क्रेप्ट अप द स्टेयर क्वाइटली एज शी कुड. वह संभल कर खामोशी से सीढ़ियां चढ़ती गई. शी एंटर्ड अ लार्ज रूम विद 3 बेड्स. एक बड़े कमरे में उन्होंने प्रवेश किया जहां 3 सफेद पलंग बिछे हुए थे. द विंडोज वर कवर्ड विथ डार्क ग्रीन कर्टन्स. खिड़कियां को गहरे हरे रंग के पर्दों से ढका था. नो वन वाज देयर. वहां पे कोई नहीं था. I directed my steps toward the corner farthest from the door. On my hands and knees, I crawled under the bed and huddled myself in the dark corner. From my hiding place, I peered out, shuddering with fear. Whenever I heard footsteps nearby, though in the hall loud voices were calling my name, and I knew that even Judwin was searching for me. The writer crawled under a bed and huddled herself in the dark corner. राइटर रेंग कर बेड के नीचे एक अंधेरे कोने में सिमट गई. शी शडर्ड विथ फियर टू हियर द फुटस्टेप्स नियर बाय. पास में कदमों की आवाज सुनकर वह डर से कांप रही थी. शी कुड हियर मैनी वॉइसेस. बहुत सी आवाजें जो थी सुनाई दे रही थी हॉल में. हर नेम वाज बीइंग कॉल्ड. उसका नाम पुकारा गया. हर फ्रेंड जूडवन वाज आल्सो सर्चिंग फॉर हर. राइटर की फ्रेंड जूडवन भी राइटर को ढूंढ रही थी. I did not open my mouth to answer. Then the steps were quickened and the voices became excited. The sounds came nearer and nearer. Women and girls entered the room. I held my breath and watched them open closet doors and peep behind large trunks. Someone threw up the curtain and the room was filled with sudden light. What caused them to stop and look under the bed, I don't know. I remember being dragged out, though I resisted by kicking and scratching wildly. In spite of myself, I was carried downstairs and tied fast in a chair. The writer, remained silent. राइटर ने मुंह नहीं खोला, चुपचाप रही. Some women and girls entered her room. कुछ औरतें और लड़कियां उसके कमरे में आई. Someone threw back the curtain. किसी ने पर्दा खींचकर पीछे हटा दिया. Room was filled with light. कमरा रोशनी से भर गया. She was found hiding under the bed. वह चारपाई के नीचे छिपी हुई मिली. She was dragged out. घसीट कर उन्हें बाहर निकाल लिया गया. She resisted by kicking and scratching violently. हालांकि राइटर ने विरोध किया, लातें मारते हुए, बुरी तरह से उन्हें खरोंचते हुए. Against her wishes, उनकी इच्छा के विपरीत, she was carried downstairs. उन्हें सीढ़ियों से नीचे लाया गया and tied fast in a chair. और कुर्सी में बांध दिया गया. I cried aloud, shaking my head all the while until I felt the cold blades of the scissors against my neck and heard them gnaw off one of my thick braids. Then I lost my spirits. Since the day I was taken from my mother, I had suffered extreme indignities. People had stared at me. I had been tossed about in the air like a wooden puppet, and now my long hair was shingled like a coward's. In my anguish, I mourned for my mother, but no one came to comfort me, not a soul reasoned quietly with me as my own mother used to do, for now I was only one of many little animals driven by a herder. The writer cried a lot as she doesn't want anyone to cut her hair. राइटर जोश से चिल्लाई क्योंकि वे बाल नहीं कटवाना चाहती थी. Suddenly she felt a pair of scissors behind her neck. Soon her hair was cut down. अचानक उन्होंने कैंची की धारों को अपनी गर्दन के साथ लगते हुए महसूस किया और जल्दी ही बाल काट दिए गए. She lost all her confidence. वह अपना आत्मविश्वास खो बैठी and felt that she had always been humiliated since she was taken away from her mother. और उन्होंने महसूस किया कि उनका हमेशा अपमान हुआ है जब से वे अपनी माँ से दूर गई. She was thrown into the air like a puppet. उन्हें एक कठपुतली की तरह हवा में उछाला गया. She wailed for her mother as she used to console her in her sad moments. राइटर अपनी माँ के लिए विलाप कर रही थी. माँ उन्हें हमेशा सांत्वना देती थी सैड मोमेंट्स में. No one came to comfort her. कोई उन्हें दिलासा देने नहीं आया. No one tried to know her point of view. किसी ने उनका दृष्टिकोण नहीं जाना. She felt like an animal that is part of a herd and is being driven by a herder. राइटर ने अपने आप को गवाले द्वारा हाँके जाने वाले अनेक छोटे जानवरों में से अपने आप को एक पाया. Here the story of cutting off long hair ends. Difficult words of the first part. The cutting of my long hair. Crashing, cracking sound, कड़कती हुई आवाज. Belfry, tower for a bell. घंटा घर. Annoying, irritating, कष्टकर. Harsh, hard and unpleasant, कठोर. Undercurrent, invisible flow, अदृश्य धारा. Bedlam, uproar, शोरगुल. Stiff, tight, तंग. Apron, overcoats, लवादे. Shingled, short cropped hair, छोटे काटे हुए बाल. Moccasins, soft leather shoes, नरम चमड़े के जूते. Stripped, took off, उतारना. Immodestly, shamelessly, निर्लज रूप से. Crawl, move slowly, रेंगना. Venture, risk, खतरा उठाना. Unskilled, untrained, अकुशल. Submit, surrender, समर्पण करना. Rebelled, revolted, विद्रोह करना. Peered, peeped, झांकना. Shuddering, trembling, कांपते हुए. Textual questions. How were the Indian girls dressed? Answer. The Indian girls were in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. The small girls wore sleeved aprons and shingled hair. Jitklasov was wearing soft flat shoes and the loose clothes of her tribe. Second question. How did Jitklasov feel after her long hair had been shingled? Answer. Jitklasov felt humiliated after her long hair was cut off. She was in tears. She mourned in anguish for her mother, but no one came to comfort her. She felt as if she was one of many little animals being driven by a herder. First part ends here. See you next video. Till then, goodbye.